the conference, which started on 18th May, goes up till 30th June. So opening session was with Ken Cloke and celebrating his birthday. And then he spoke about the war in Ukraine, lessons for mediators. And I'm going to be celebrating 18th May as World Mediators Day because of the person Ken is. Now, also, let me just take you through the schedule. Let's just have a look at what all is coming up, what all has happened. So, of course, you find the schedule, you'll find it on my social media post, the link there. So what it does give you is the day, that's the month, that's the day, date, the time, session number, the session, and the YouTube link. So you can click here, watch the recording. So we've gone through Ken Cloke's birthday and the inaugural address, the culture and the mediator mindset, taking mediation to people, bringing people under the tree, neurodiversity and mediation, mediation a life skill, connecting mediators, creating connective communications, restructuring families, a new approach to mediation, mediation in the court system, Boon Bain. So we've got through a lot and still lots to come. So this is where we are right now, 61st session. Yes, Gabriela, how are you? You are, I'm sure, going to unmute yourself during the session or not? What's going to happen?
All right, sorry.
I said while you come in, I'll just generally take people through the schedule. That's done. But before you come in, this is this new format that I've done, which you also have to be part of, is you are going to tell us about the conference.
Me?
Yes.
Well, all I can say is that you do a wonderful job. Ken Cloke is your inspiration because he's in most of the of the information about the conference. And I truly agree with you that he is a wonderful inspiration to us all. And all the people that you bring in, with a few exceptions like me, are very...
I was going to say, including you.
are very interesting and very meaningful to the construction of the mediation experience around the world. So thanks so much for having me as well quite a few times.
Let me tell you, you've come enough times to, so you're as much of, okay, not as much as of a regular as Ken. Ken is, of course, stage ahead, but as much. So, okay, close by. So not a, you've been here enough. I put it on my post also that there's a special Gabriela playlist on my channel. Okay. Please watch that, watch all of them. Because we've had such interesting conversations, Gabriela. They've been so nice. And we are continuing that with this. So family, constellations, and mediation, you're going to tell us about yourself. You're going to go ahead. I am going to use the term I used, which you did not like last time. It's your show. It means you are taking over from here. It's not that it's a show, which you thought that time where you got it wrong. It's just your show. So you take it wherever you want. Call me in whenever you want. totally your wish. It's your
All
show.
right. So what I find the most interesting about family constellation in relation to mediation is that every time when people are trapped inside a conflict circuit, normally a conflict doesn't appear from one day to the next. It is a process where people get further and further apart until the point where they cannot have a dialogue, right? Many times it's multiple monologues, but each one is talking to his or himself and to what he or she projects of the other person. Normally, in most conflict situations, most people involved are very certain that the problem is the other person, that although they have some responsibility for whatever happened, it is the other person's attitude that caused whatever bad behavior they had. So there is always this dual polarity between good and bad, between me and you, between what is right and what is wrong. And even people who are very self-aware and who work hard on self-consciousness, if they are involved in a conflict that they have already tried to resolve and have not been able to, it is because there is something in themselves, within, out, that they have not seen yet. There is something in them that connects them to this other person that is so awful and so difficult and so responsible. And how come they, as an adult, talking only about conflicts among adults, cannot make a choice to either leave that situation or solve that situation? Because we are all free, right? Theoretically. In practice, I'm not sure. But in theory, we're all free human beings who make conscient options in life. And the more we believe that we are so conscient and we have so much free will, the less conscient we are about the things that are so big for us that we can't even see, that we can't even separate from what we are and what we do and what we choose. So we are all members of this huge sea where we swim all our life long since we were born, so we can't even question it. It's just like, I like the image of the sea or of an aquarium, because you cannot ask the fish if he likes the water or not. You cannot ask the fish, how would it be if you lived in the desert? Because the fish doesn't have an answer. He cannot imagine what it would be like to live without water all around. And this is exactly like we all are in relation to our original system, which is the family where we are born or where we are raised. So, and when we talk about being born or being raised, this is also very complex, but it's important to take it into account that when a baby is born, the baby takes place wherever he or she was born. The baby doesn't choose and doesn't judge the family where he or she was born. The baby just exists and depends on the main adults for his survival. So attachment, belonging is absolutely fundamental to the baby. I think I mentioned it in one of our conversations that on the Second World War, there was an experiment in concentration camps where babies were taken from their mothers in the camps and were taken to a nursery where they had everything that they could materially need. They would have food, medication, heater when it was cold, everything, hygiene, everything. But as an experiment, they could not have affection. The nurses who took care of the babies were forbidden to hold them in their arms and to look at them in the eyes. And 100% of these babies died because we are much more connected to other human beings. We are much more in need of being seen and being acknowledged than we are in need of water and air, as incredible as it seems. It's a very cruel experiment to be made, so of course it would have to be in a circumstance of a war, but it brings us this notion that for a baby, belonging is not an option. It is a basic need. So the baby will do whatever it takes to belong, live and die to belong, and to be connected to those to whom he or she has as a reference. So there is this biological attachment, because no matter how the family is configured, talking about new configurations of family, more flexible, more creative, more everything around the world, this is the family that the baby has, and the baby will not question it, the baby will adapt to it. But there is unavoidably a man and a woman who gave their biological material so that the baby could be made. So these biological parents are and will always be part of that baby's belonging system. Even when the baby was given to adoption right after birth, even when the baby never knew who his father is, doesn't matter. There is this level of belonging that is important, unavoidably important. And then if this baby happens to be raised by another family or by another person or by someone who just took care of the baby in orphanage, or doesn't matter. There are these key people. There are a reference to that new human being, and that he will be very willing to adapt so that he can belong. So this is the first basic understanding that we need to have when we see people in conflict. Because even after we are grown-ups, we have made so much progress, and we are very complex and very sophisticated. Those beliefs that baby, the baby we were, had as a basis of survival. How can I behave in order to belong in this system? My family. The family is always the first system. That reference from a moment where the baby had no conscience of itself, had no notion of separation. There were no synapses in the brain yet. even inside the mother's womb, all those beliefs that the baby needed to develop in order to survive, and of course it was not conscient, they remain on us. And the only way to one day be free to really make our own choices, our conscient choices, is when you can be in peace with everything that was the way it was, for the price it costed to you as a developing being, and to those who took care of you. Because of course they are not perfect either. They are just human beings trying to be happy and avoid suffering, as Dalai Lama would say. So in this fight for survival that we still live in our planet, many times we make choices that if we were making them today, we probably would have made different choices. But just because we made those previous choices before and learned something with it. So everything that happened in our own life, in the lives of the people who brought us here to the world and who were responsible for making it possible for us to grow, everything that was perfect. But most people, and I would say all people, because even when we are really, really into self-awareness, and when we are really into all the great philosophies that we can reach one day, but if we are in this world on earth the way it is, if we were received in this planet for a purpose that is good for us and good for the planet in terms of collective development, it is because we are far from perfect. So it means that we have much more shadow than light yet. We're little by little getting a little more light and a little less shadow, but having a shadow, or in other words, shadow in terms of Carl Jung, in other words, having parts of us, parts of what constitutes us, is unavoidable. It's a reality, and it's our space to grow. We can only grow into the shadows, because whatever is in the light, we already know, and we already are. But it is in the shadows, in the things that we are, that we don't know, that we don't get in constant contact with, that we have space to grow. And it is beautiful when we stop judging ourselves, so that we can include more and more of the things that one day were too difficult for us to handle, so we kept it in the shadow. This is the process of self-awareness. This is the process of having more conscious choices about what we are, what we do, how we deal with the difficult things, how we go through life, giving it a lot more meaning than we could have done before. So I'm having all this philosophical introduction because most people who have engaged in a conflict that is so difficult to solve that they couldn't do it themselves, it is because the origin of the conflict is in this shadow part. So many people who are in conflict, they believe they are adults, very conscious and very rational, but it is their child's hurt that is in the unconscious part of the adult that is normally connecting them to that other person or that situation that has this flavor of conflict because it hurts. And more often than not, it has nothing to do with the other person. It has nothing to do with John Smith. John Smith is just, as an example, the person that made me contact something that hurts inside of me. And that hurt part of me was hurt much long before I met John. It has to do with these hidden parts of me that I put in the shadow because at the time they were created, I was not sophisticated enough to deal with. But as soon as I get a lot more tools to deal with it, life brings opportunity after opportunity to help me look at it, even if it hurts, so that I can finally learn how to re-include it in the light, in the conscious part of me. And when I'm able to do that, and when I'm able to really look at myself and learn how to love even that experience that hurts, because it taught me something, and it allowed me to today be better and more sophisticated. And when I include it, I grow. So more often than not, when I can look at this part of myself and I really learn how to deal with this hurt feeling of myself, the other one loses power over me, loses the power to hurt me, because it's just not hurt inside of me anymore. So whatever he or she does belongs to them, not to me. And I am not in conflict anymore. What imprisons me in conflict is the fact that I am refusing to look and to love this part of myself. So the other one is just an instrument that we should thank, because it's helping us see what we couldn't see before, but now we can. So, of course, we're not going to have this conversation with the person that comes to mediation, because the person is in the middle of the pain, and any philosophical, intellectual explanation will not be able to really go through the lenses that the person can use at that time. So what we can do as mediators, instead of telling about the history of healing and hurting and rehealing and whatever, is to help the person see his or herself inside a protected environment that the mediator creates most times in the private meetings. So it is in these private meetings that we, not as therapists, but as facilitators for conflict resolution, can help the person look at herself enough, not to the other person, that is a second stage, but first to his or herself. And when the person can really get in contact with this part of her that has nothing to do with the other person, and can start the awareness process about her own power to look, to see, to include, and to love herself, then the person will be a lot more able to build possible solutions, proposals that the other person can accept. And of course, the other person will have the same process. And probably what brought the other person to the conflict is something that has nothing to do with the previous person. Because the history of humankind is kind of the same. The person has no consciousness, and that's why he or she was trapped in the conflict. It's always a matter of knowing yourself so that you have the option not to heal the other person, but to make your own options to stay, but stay as a whole, or to leave. We always have this option, even when it is our family. And we, of course, when we are adults, a child doesn't have this option because the child needs to belong, because the child is dependent. But as soon as we become adults with a minimum condition to fend for ourselves, we always have the option. So, for example, sometimes we have abusive parents. Just a second. You can never say goodbye to your parents. You can go live abroad. You can just move to another apartment. Of course, that has a price. You have to pay the rent. You have to buy an apartment. You have to work hard to be able to pay for your own bills in every term, not only financially, emotionally, and everything else. And many times you have to face a very difficult decision. That Bert Hellinger was the creator of Constellations, and he has an expression that is very interesting but very hard to be understood. That is bad consciousness. So when you make a decision in good consciousness, it doesn't mean that this is right or wrong. It means that good consciousness is everything that enhances your belonging to your system. So, for example, if your father was a kamikaze and you become a bomb man, that even though you know you're gonna die, even though you know you're gonna kill, and it doesn't, there's no judgment about right and wrong, but that means you belong. So just as a more frequent example, I have a very good friend who had breast cancer. And it turned on an alarm system in me when she discovered her cancer, and she said the following sentence: when I discovered the cancer, I was calm. It made me calm. I said, well, this is not what most people experience. So did you have other cases of cancer in your family? Oh, yes. My mother died of cancer and my father as well. So instead of being in shock or in fear, that meant that she belonged. Fortunately, she is healed now. And she's doing a lot of constellation. She's a constellator now, actually. And I hope her daughter will not have to have cancer in order to believe she belongs, because it became conscient through her. So it has nothing, I'm not talking about medicine here. This is not, I'm not talking about matter. I'm talking about the unconscious processes that leads to behaviors facing one situation or another. Okay, so once you become conscious of a pattern and you have the strength to face the bad consciousness. And what is the bad consciousness? The good consciousness is what leads you to belong. Bad consciousness is what makes you different from the previous generations to which you belong. So it brings the threat of not belonging in a very subtle way. So when you say to your ancestors, thank you so much for everything you had to face in order to give me the life that I have and enable me to be on earth and do something good with this life that I got from you. When you're able to say that, the next stage as an adult is to say, I take everything you gave me as a starting point. And I ask for your blessing so that I can now build my own future with the best I can. And when you're free enough to build your own future, and you're only free when you are in peace with everything that happened until then, so you can look forward instead of keep looking back and trying to fix the mistakes of those before you and even your own mistakes previously. Only when you do that, you're really free to choose, including when you choose not to coexist with someone. Because even with your own blood family, you can choose not to follow the same path. You will always belong, this is not an option, but you can have a different life, either for better, in terms of having success in life. Many people are kind of blocking themselves for success because in their family, there was never so much success. So having a lot of success may cause them not to look like their system. And this is a fear that is mostly unconscious. But when you really have your whole system in your heart, you are free to go wherever you go, belonging to them from inside out. Is it too crazy what I'm saying?
Not at all. Perfect. You always make sense. It takes us time to understand that, but yes, you always make sense.
Bert Hellinger came a long time before me with a lot of other people who are already saying that. And what is interesting is that everything that constellation brings about, what Bert Hellinger created is not really what constellation is. I think I told you in a previous conversation that the original name for constellation in German, because Bert Hellinger is German, is not constellation that seems like the stars or whatever, was Familienstellen, which in German means family co-location. So it's about the relative places where people find themselves within a system. So for example, this is one way for the white one to co-locate in relation to the red. This is a completely different relational pattern. The co-location brings to consciousness the relational pattern. So this is one pattern. This is a completely different pattern. This is another one, because this one just left the system. And that would be another one. This is another one. This is another one, and so on and so forth. So every relational scheme among the members of a system makes a difference in your role in life. And of course, the original system is the family, the biological family, and then a family that raised the person, and then the family that the person will create as an adult, will re-inaugurate a system, the company where you work, the group of mediators where you belong, the neighbors, the country, the planet, the systems of planets, the solar systems. These are all systems that have a connection that expresses itself through the co-location of the members. And of course, although there are some trends that characterize each system, and that's why for example, talking about my own systems. So I don't use my husband's name. I didn't adopt his name, although we are married, but in Brazil this is possible. But I belong to the family Orivio, which is my mother's family, and to the family.
Which you have there only because I put it there. I don't know why you've been skipping this these days. I had to put it there.
That is true. That is true. And the thing is, when I configured my Zoom, it was not me. Someone did it for me. And then every time I have to remember to reconfigure it, even because it's all in capital letters, and I don't think it's very nice. It seems like I'm screaming. So every time I rewrite, but sometimes I forget. So, but anyway, so I have Gabriela is my given name, and I have Orivio as my mother's family name, and Asmar as my father's family name. When I was born, I wasn't born out of nothing. I was born from the Orivio system and from the Asmar system. So I belong to both equally, 50-50. And my daughter also belongs to these systems and also to my husband's systems. And so we are always a fruit of many trees. And we cannot just not belong. And even if I didn't have my mother's name, family name, I would belong to her system. Either I want it or not, either my father wants it or not, belonging is not an option. And when I don't recognize the importance of these systems, including what was difficult in each one of them, I get trapped by the past, by trying to solve problems that are not mine and that are from people that are bigger than me, just because they were the ones who gave me a spot in that system. So, and there are other kinds of, as we say, entanglements, which are the delocation of members of the system. So, for example, if I am, this is not true, okay, but just as an example, if my father was an alcoholic and I judge my father and I am ashamed of him and of the things he did, and I want to correct it. I want to prove to the world that I'm not as bad as my father because I don't drink. Or because I refuse to drink so that I don't look like my father. This is the reference. Either when you copy a pattern, So for example, if my father was an alcoholic, then I must be an alcoholic so that I belong, for example. If I copy it, or if I try to be the very opposite of it, I'm still connected. My attention, my flow of energy, of life, is still in that pattern of the past. And probably the fact that he was an alcoholic had to do with his way of surviving the difficult things that happened in his life. And he survived enough to give me my portion of life. So if he has survived, if he used alcohol as a way of survival, of dealing with the difficult things in his life, because he couldn't do otherwise, he didn't have other tools, he didn't have, at his time, there was no therapy, there was no awareness, things had to be done in hiding because nobody could know, so he couldn't ask for help. He already survived, and he gave me enough to be able to be here today as an adult making my own choices. So my way of honoring the life he gave me is to do the best of my life, not to try to live his life or correct his life or do it differently or do it the same. So I need to be able to love and to be thankful for what I got, even the difficult parts, so that I can move ahead. This is a mathematical equation. And one of the creators of methodologies to deal with constellation, because actually, if we go to a broader understanding of constellation, it's all about recognizing this field, and we call it field of connectiveness that brings us together in each system. The way to deal with the field, the way to work on the field and bring to light the patterns that were unconscious before, and that's why they were causing effects that are unwanted, normally because we are either copying a painful pattern, or because we are trying to antagonize to it. The way to deal with it has some different lines of work. So Bert Hellinger was the one who first became famous around the world for this kind of work. So when we talk about family constellation or Familienstellen, we are talking about Bert Hellinger's methodology. But nowadays there are other methodologies, and interestingly, the three main creators of methodologies are all German, with some characteristics in common. But the other methodology that I also admire a lot and use quite a bit is called structural constellations. And this other methodology was created by a man called Matthias Varga von Kibet and his wife, Insa Sparer. And Insa is a psychologist, and Matthias is a mathematician. He and a philosopher as well. And he is the I forgot now his title, but anyway, he's the top guy of logics in the Munich University, Munich. So he's very rational. And the way he deals with the field is completely different than what Bert Hellinger did, although it, of course, starts from the same understanding of the existence of this pattern of connectiveness. But what I mean is that what men can create is the methodology to deal with the phenomenon. But the phenomenon is a natural reality. It's not created by any of us. So we just become aware of it and learn how to deal with it so that we can profit from it. And the main deliverable of a constellation in relation to mediation, okay? I'm not a therapist, and I say that many times because many people think that constellation is just for therapy. So for example, if the person wants to use constellation for therapeutic purposes, what most of the times happens is that the person will come to me, who is not a therapist. He or she can go to a constellator that is also a therapist. I'm not. So what people come to see, I can help them see through the methodology. But they many times bring their own therapist to watch the constellation and then take all the awareness that it brought into therapy. Sometimes people come to constellate because they have a medical problem, a physical symptom. So it is very useful to bring the doctor, but doctors normally don't have this time. So when someone comes to constellate with this kind of problem, the first thing I ask is, have you been to a doctor? Have you done a checkup? If not, constellation is not for you right now. You can only use constellation after you already have a diagnosis and you want to explore these hidden roots of behavior that may have brought you to this point. So you can deal with it, but of course that will never replace the traditional medicine. It's complementary, it's an addition, but never an either or. If the person has a relational problem with someone else, mediation will still be necessary. So the decision-making process starts after the constellation, and we'll use the traditional professionals that have to do with the issue. But the constellation will deliver a clearer map from inside out of the client. That starts by the internal image of the client within the system that is relevant to the case, professional system or family system or the romantic system or whatever system. And then the person will be able to be more aware of the elements that really had a relevant influence over the perception of the person in that given situation and all the behaviors that were driven out of this perception. So the person will have a better quality of quantity and quality of information so that he or she can make a better decision after all. And I have used it in mediations in many different ways. In Brazil, very interesting because although the creators of constellations are mostly German, it is in Brazil that it develops more. It spreads more in creative ways and into the judicial, very traditional system, and the public health system. So the public health system in Brazil already recognizes constellation as one alternative therapy, such as, I'm not comparing, it's completely different things, but homeopathics, acupuncture, and constellations are all in this list of alternative treatments that the public health system recognizes as useful. So in the judiciary, a judge started using constellations within the same structure that was built thanks to the Civil Procedure Code to offer originally mediation and conciliation. So this judge started offering also constellation for, normally it's on family courts. So for the couples involved in a certain kind of conflict, they are invited throughout Brazil, it's done in many different ways. So I'll just talk about one of the examples. The couples that have the same problem, the same demand, such as alimony or coexistence with the child, how do you say that in English? Shared
co-parenting.
Yeah, co-parenting. And so different issues are invited to different meetings. So all the cases with alimony, all the cases on co-parenting, all the cases on whatever, they are invited to a lecture about constellation. It's an invitation, it's not mandatory. Those who want to go, go. And those who want to stay, stay. So it's all voluntary. And when they stay, they go through a very interesting experience, which is a prototype constellation. So there will be one representative for a parent, a father, and one representative for a mother, and of course, one for a child. So it's not about Mary and John and Peter. It's about a mother, a father, a son, or a daughter. And when they have this experience, this kind of prototype constellation, what it brings about, or it brings up, is what all mothers and fathers and children have in common in that kind of situation. So it comes the common trend up, what comes up. And then they go home and they reflect upon that experience. And of course, different people will have different conclusions out of it. It will take them to different little boxes inside of them. And then 2 weeks afterwards, they are invited to mediation. And the interesting numbers are in the comparison between a group of cases that go straight to mediation and a group of cases that go through this experience in constellation and then go to mediation. So what we compare are the results of mediation, but with this different background. So the cases that go straight to mediation, they settle about 60% in average. The cases that go through constellation and then to mediation, the average is 86%. And the quality of the agreements are stronger when they have gone through constellation, because these cases do not come back. These cases do not come back to the same court with new types of conflicts in relation to the cases that went straight to mediation. So it doesn't mean that mediation is not good enough. It means that it can have an addition to it, because talking about the methodologies, of course, they're completely different. But the main aspect here, in terms of the quality of the decision-making process, is that mediation is, want it or not, is still dependent on intellectuality, the intellectuality of the mediator, and the mental processes of the parties. And our intellectual, mental decision-making process is always filtered by our defense system. That was the one responsible for putting all the difficult experiences in the shadow at the first place. So these, how can I say, this chaperone, this bodyguard of the difficult memories, which is called the mind. And in Portuguese, it is interesting because the word mind and the word lie are the same, sound the same. So the mind lies. The mind lies with the best intention, which is to help us survive through the most difficult traumatic experiences of our lives, where we wouldn't have enough energy to look at the problem and solve it. So we had to put it aside so that we could go on living. But the problem is that the one who took the memories to the shadow is quite unlikely to bring them back. So even when we have very experienced and very sophisticated mediators with all the good questions and all the transformative processes, that helps a lot. But there is still a group of experiences that are so much bigger than that person, like the water to the fish, that the person will not be able to touch consciously unless there is this other kind of methodology. And I'm not talking only about constellation. There are other methodologies that do it to really help this person put aside their mental processes and just connect with all the knowledge that is there untouched. And we need other levels of perception in order to touch it. Constellation uses the sensorial perception most of all. So it's like our body is a big antenna, and we start having perceptions that are physical. Sometimes, just one example, I did a constellation to a woman, and it has nothing to do with the issue. It was a professional issue, actually. And when she went into the field, because we can do the constellation with representatives, other people who will resonate with the members of that system, or we can do with little figures, or even with papers on the floor where the client himself or herself will step on and have these perceptions. And of course, when I am alone with the client at first doesn't know who is who on the field, so that the prejudice will not block their other perceptions. And then at a certain point, I tell them who is who, and I check if it makes sense to them. So this woman, she was in a certain spot in the system. She was feeling like she needed to go to the bathroom. And when she changed spots, she wouldn't feel it anymore. So I said, well, this has something to do with the person that is in her system that she connects with in that spot. And it was that person, which happened to be her mother. She had a physical issue that led to that sensation every time.
Amazing.
And of course, she didn't know who she was representing at that moment. So these things happen. And we have this these antennas, not because we are special. It has nothing to do with other dimensions. It has nothing to do with mediunity, nothing. It has to do with this level of information that is there for the client. And the client is there, and there doesn't mean physically close, because we do constellations online with whatever part of the globe, and it works the same. So that level of complexity is not totally explained yet by science, but there is already a lot of research going on. And the main reference to these researches is an Englishman called Rupert Sheldrake. He is a biologist and a philosopher, and he has many other titles. He's an absolutely fantastic human being, still alive, thank God. And he was the first one to explain to Bert Hellinger why things happened the way they happened. Because for Bert Hellinger, it didn't matter. He was just interested in, I know it happens and that's enough. But for science, we are still getting there. But Rupert Sheldrake is evolving a lot, and other followers as well.
Look, what happens in a conference normally in such a situation, everyone stands up and gives a standing ovation. Just think that all of them are there. Of course, Michaela is saying she's fascinating, and Constantia say bomb day after you. Because the thing is that whatever you're saying might sound very theoretical and something to everyone, but just because I've sat in one and I've seen what people who had no idea about the situation, they have not connected, they were feeling funny in that whole thing. They had some, I don't know, someone was feeling really uneasy and all that. I just found that really interesting. I mean, I found it really interesting. So we have to do that again sometime. And
we can do, if you want, we can do it live, as you normally do. Yeah. But then I would suggest it would not be someone's specific case. We can do a prototype constellation online, no problem, because then it's not an individual life. I did one, for example, when the bomb exploded in Beirut. I did a constellation for Beirut, and in that case, I raised money for the people who participated, and it was all donated to Lebanon to help the victims and etc. So we can do something. I wouldn't do it in relation to the war that is going on, because it's an open wound. So I think it would not be, I think that it would have to be in private if people belonging to those systems would like to participate. But we can do about anything. For example, I did one on the coronavirus when the pandemic started. I did one on the prosperity of mediators around the world, but it's all in Portuguese. So we can take it any subject and build a constellation on it that will not expose anyone.
What I'm planning now, Gabriela, is that we'll maybe create a little circle of people who are wanting to get into it. We'll do it with them. We might not put it live, because sometimes, like you said, that maybe might have an effect on what is happening, while we don't want to lose that aspect, which I found in that closed space. I found it really interesting. So let's not lose that. I think this is what I'm going to create, which I'm going to talk to you about. Maybe after, when we're not live, we'll talk about how to set that up. Because I find this is something that we need to, of course, get people involved from all over the world. It's interesting, but do it in a structured manner. Do it in a structured manner. I think it's going to be, I don't know. I find it really fascinating. So we have to take it forward. We have to take it forward. You of course are doing it, but I want to take it even further. Because you don't have too much time, Gabriela. You have to understand, you're a busy woman. I'm not a busy woman, first of all.
No, you're not a busy woman for sure.
Exactly.
You're very busy.
So that's why we have to take it forward. So, but now, what is the plan now? Are we now? Is there? I mean, of course, look, the practical part of it you really can't explain because, like I said, I've seen it, so I can understand it. But I think someone watching might not be able to, of course, understand. But you want to make it any simpler for them in any way, or this is it?
We can make systemic exercises. They're open for people, and each one will do in their own home. They don't even need to be with the camera on. I would just conduct. But for spectators, meaning people who are just watching us, I mean, experience, really feeling it is the differential. So what I always say to people is try it once before it's with you. So if you're interested in experimenting a constellation or to being a client to constellation, first go to somebody else's constellation and really feel it in your body, what it is to be a representative of someone else and how it works in your body. It has nothing with magic. It has nothing, I mean, it doesn't, people don't get, how can I say, influenced by it after the constellation is over. It's something very, it's simple. It's much more simple than it sounds, but it is the experience that will make the difference.
So anyway, so whoever wants interested to be part of this circle that I'm creating with Gabriela, please get in touch. We'll have some sessions. However, whatever we do in that, we'll decide. That's up to us. But we definitely are going to take this forward. Yes, Gabriela?
Yes.
Perfect. So what we'll do is let's shut the live stream. I'll speak to you after that, after the thing. But
Okay.
so thank you very much, Gabriela. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure listening to you. That's all we need to do. Just listen. That's all. And always new things to learn. And of course, it feels good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.